Welcome to the Party S channel. Today we explain Exodus chapter 23 in a clear and simple way, step by step.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the context of Exodus 23, move right into the laws of justice and mercy, explore the Sabbaths and sacred festivals, discuss the angel and the land, pull out some key ideas and life lessons, and finish up with a short recap.
So, part 1, the context of Exodus 23.
To truly grasp what's happening here, we need to place ourselves exactly where the Israelites are in the story. We're standing right at the foot of Mount Sinai. God has just delivered the core, foundational commandments, and now he's laying down the precise, step-by-step rules for building an actual functioning society in the real world. Think about it. The Israelites aren't just an extended family or a group of recently freed slaves anymore. They are rapidly transforming into a full-blown nation. And as we all know, any nation needs clear, actionable laws to function justly. That's exactly what this chapter delivers.
Let's dive right into Section 2, the laws of justice and mercy.
Starting right out of the gate in verse 1, the text tackles interpersonal ethics head-on. If you look at the classic 1917 Hebrew-English translation, it explicitly warns us against spreading false reports. It says, "Do not put your hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness." I mean, verse 1 is just completely unambiguous. You simply cannot start malicious rumors, and you absolutely cannot collude with bad actors to lie in a court of law. The entire foundation of this newly formed holy society rests on unshakable, absolute truth.
Now, have you ever been tempted to just go along with the crowd? Verses 2 and 3 tackle human nature so brilliantly. Just because public opinion is swaying a certain way doesn't make it right. You are strictly commanded to stand alone for the truth if necessary. But then, verse 3 throws in a really surprising twist. It tells us not to twist justice to favor the poor either. You might be tempted to bend the rules out of pity, but true justice has to be entirely blind to a person's social or financial status. It's about fairness across the board.
And then we get to verses 4 and 5, where God commands something I like to call radical mercy. It means your personal hatred for someone cannot stop you from alleviating the suffering of their animal or protecting their property. Imagine this everyday scenario. You're walking down the road and you see your sworn enemy's donkey collapsed under a massive load. Now, the natural human instinct might be to just smirk and keep walking, right? But God commands, do not leave the animal there. Be sure you help him with it. You literally have to put aside your personal grudge, walk over to your enemy, and lift that heavy burden together. It's a real game changer for how communities operate.
Moving on to verses 6 through 8, the text loops back to the courts. It warns against denying justice to the poor, accepting bribes, and executing the innocent. Pretty straightforward. But then we hit verse 9. Just take a second to let the weight of this moral law sink in. God tells them not to oppress the alien, the foreigner. Why? Because the memory of their own slavery in Egypt is the exact reason they must protect the stranger. God demands empathy based directly on their own historical pain. He's saying you know exactly what it feels like to be an outsider, so you must never, ever inflict that specific pain on anyone else.
So, having firmly established how we treat people, the chapter transitions to a fascinating new question. How does a holy society manage its calendar and its resources? We're shifting gears from how we interact with each other to how we interact with time itself.
This brings us to Section 3, Sabbaths and Sacred Festivals.
Let's see how this calendar builds. Verses 10 and 11 explain that for 6 years you farm your land, your vineyards, and your olive groves. But the 7th year, that is a total rest. You don't harvest a thing. Whatever grows naturally is left completely for the poor and for the wild beasts to eat. It's an incredible social safety net. Then, verse 12 applies the same exact principle to the week. 6 days of work, but the 7th day is a complete stop. Why? Specifically so your ox, your donkey, the slave born in your house, and the alien living among you can be refreshed. In God's economy, rest is absolutely not a luxury. It's a universal, God-given right for everyone, and even for the animals.
Next, verses 14 through 17 map out the national annual calendar. 3 times a year, all men are required to appear before the sovereign Lord. It kicks off with the Feast of Unleavened Bread in the month of Abib to commemorate the Exodus itself. You eat bread made without yeast for 7 days, remembering that hasty departure from Egypt. This is then followed by 2 absolutely critical agricultural events. First, the Feast of Harvest, where you present the very first crops of your fields. And finally, the Feast of Ingathering at the end of the year when the full, massive harvest is finally brought in.
Now in verses 18 and 19, God establishes some very clear, simple boundaries for these rituals. He ensures that the absolute best is given back to him while also maintaining a strict, profound separation between symbols of life, like a mother's milk, and the meat of a sacrifice. The text says you cannot offer blood with anything containing yeast. You must bring the absolute best of your first fruits to the house of the Lord your God. And then we get that famous dietary prohibition. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. You must separate the milk that sustains life from the meat of an animal that has been killed. And here's a fascinating fact for you. This single specific verse is actually the ancient foundation for the strict separation of meat and dairy that we see in kosher diets today.
Which brings us to Section 4, the angel and the land.
We now arrive at the final major movement of the chapter. Looking right at the text in verse 20, God makes a massive declaration. He is sending an angel ahead of the Israelites to guard them along the way and to bring them to a specially prepared place. They are about to enter some seriously treacherous territory, but they are not going it alone. They have a designated divine protector leading the charge.
But with this protector comes a profound warning. Verses 21 through 23 tell the Israelites to pay close attention to this angel, because he acts with the full authority of God's name. That means strict obedience is required. If they listen carefully and follow instructions, God promises he will personally wipe out the powerful nations currently occupying the land of Canaan, specifically the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hivites, and Jebusites. God will literally become an enemy to their enemies.
There are, however, strict conditions laid out in verse 24. If the Israelites completely destroy the sacred stones of the Canaanites and worship only the Lord, God promises some truly incredible national protections. I mean, we're talking about comprehensive blessings here. Verses 25 to 28 promise that God will bless their food and their water, he'll remove sickness entirely from their midst, ensure there is no barrenness or miscarriages, and even grant them a full, complete lifespan. He even promises to send the hornet ahead of them to drive out the enemy nations in a wave of sheer panic and terror. No way, right? That's divine intervention on a massive scale.
Yet in verses 29 and 30, we find this brilliant piece of practical, grounded wisdom. God reveals a deeply pragmatic plan for actually taking the land. It's not going to happen instantly. Instead, it's going to happen little by little, so the ecosystem itself doesn't collapse before the Israelites have enough people to manage it. Think about it. If God removed all the enemies in a single year, there simply wouldn't be enough Israelites to farm that vast amount of land. It would become desolate, and the wild beasts would multiply and become a severe danger to the camp. They literally have to grow into their blessing.
Finally, in verse 31, God clearly defines the massive borders of their future home. We're talking borders stretching all the way from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, the Mediterranean, and from the desert all the way up to the Euphrates River. But he ends the chapter in verses 32 and 33 with a final, very strict command. They are to make absolutely no covenants with the local inhabitants or their gods. Why? Because if they let them stay, the worship of those foreign gods will undoubtedly become a snare, a deadly trap for sin that pulls Israel right away from the Lord.
All right, let's move to Section 5, Key Ideas and Life Lessons.
Having walked through the text verse by verse, let's distill these ancient laws down into some practical lessons we can actually apply today. First, we learn to stand alone for justice. We prioritize integrity over popularity, refusing to let public opinion dictate our morality. Second, we learn to choose compassion over grudges, actively helping even our opponents carry their literal or metaphorical burdens. Third, we're reminded to honor the rhythm of life by fiercely protecting our time for rest. And finally, we learn to trust in slow, steady progress. God's little-by-little strategy reminds us that true growth requires immense patience. Sometimes we actually need to mature before we can handle the full weight of the blessing we're asking for.
Section 6, Chapter 23, Short Recap.
Before we completely wrap up this explainer, let's just take a quick second to review the journey we've just taken. We've seen exactly how Exodus 23 masterfully bridges the micro-level rules of daily empathy and justice with the macro-level theology of sacred time and national destiny. From absolute, unshakable integrity in the courtroom, to the radical mandate to feed the poor from the fallow land, to the grand promise of a guiding angel leading them into their future, it's a comprehensive blueprint for creating a society truly anchored in holiness and truth. It leaves us with a pretty profound question to chew on. If a modern society actually lived by these ancient rules today, seamlessly combining unshakable truth with radical mercy, what would our world actually look like?
Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.